Welcome everybody, Black to Signif and sure. But seriously, folks, welcome everybody, and those of you who are joining us for the first time in the Zoom program, we're glad to have you. And the OLLI experience, and I hope you will enjoy the class, and I'll try to make all the exams as easy as possible so you won't be in any stress. Seriously, I picked this year to talk about a period that we only know about because our older family members told us about it, and we did not experience these various, in many cases, terrible events firsthand. We just knew about them from those who preceded us, but they are, of course, very important to us and to the world. We start this particular term with that period that many of us had to study in school and heard about from parents and grandparents, 1933 to 1939. And this particular segment is going to be somewhat nebulous in topic and time. It's going to deal with the period basically from 1933 to 1936. And as I go through it, you will see the reason why, I hope. But I named it the fascist period for obvious reasons, because of Mussolini first and Hitler second. You're thinking maybe about the communists. Well, they are part of our story too, but they preceded and they followed. So we can narrow it a bit with Italy and Germany. Insofar as we're starting with fascism, then let us go to Benito Mussolini, because in terms of the various states that we will talk about, Italy is the one it's a wannabe. You know, it wants to be one of the top countries. It can't be. I love Italy. We all do. I know many of you been there, and I mean, who would I want to go back? I mean, we can all do Chamber of Commerce stuff. There's no question. Milan, Rome, Venice, Florence, wherever. So I'm not knocking Italy. But in terms of the great power states, you got to admit, it's always trying and it never makes it. And that's just one of the realities. And we will see this over and over again in this course, but particularly in the case of where it starts, because in fact, what was called, and this will be DOA, dead on arrival. It's called the Full Power Pack, and this is something Mussolini dreamed up. And you think he just dreams it up? Yes, he basically had the ambassadors from Germany, Britain, and France come to his office. That's the truth. In 1933, and I'm thinking Hitler hadn't been in that long. So these three ambassadors, he said, wouldn't it be great? We just have this pledge amongst us big shots. Get it? We're there with you. That we will preserve the peace and stability of Europe. And they're not going to say, oh, no. No, everybody's going, see, we, yeah. I mean, it's like fantastic, you know, all the agreements. But the truth of the matter is it's a dead letter. It was an effort to ignore the League of Nations and of course, make Mussolini the center. You're saying, but what about the Soviets? No communists need apply, okay? So we're not interested in that. The democracies, well, they can come on too, because we're all interested in keeping peace and being friends. It's a non-starter, but that's sort of the first major diplomatic event of 1933. Now, clearly, Hitler came to power that year. But I'm just using this as an international event. And I don't think Mussolini at this point really understands the significance of Hitler and the Nazis, except to say, oh, wow, he wants to be like me. Oh, those Germans. I mean, but then you know the man must have looked at himself every morning and said, you're so hot. God. Oh, how did the Italians say amore? Yeah. He did not have any kinds of, what do you call it, esteem issues. I think he had plenty of self-esteem. Yeah. So, see, he loved his uniforms. That's all part of being a good fascist. No civics. Always looking like he is so sharp. Okay. Poland. We knew we were going to come to Poland because Poland is always in a bad situation. You have neighbors and you want respect, maybe not love. Love's a little too much to ask for. We're not going out. We can just, wave through the window and say hi or something. But it is interesting to understand that the French in this period had already more or less drawn in Poland with the idea of, you've got problems. Those Germans are a problem for you, and maybe those Russians could be a problem. Would you like for us to be your ami, your friend? We. And so, of course, the Poles are naturally going to say yes. The odd thing is that in this relationship in the 1920s, they had no idea what would happen in 1934, and that is the Germans and Poles created what's called a non-aggression pact. And you've heard about the non-aggression pact in 1938 between the Soviets and the Germans. This is an earlier version, and I guess states like that take what they can get, like when the Germans come to Warsaw, and they say, we could have this understanding, because of course, when we look at that situation, you see the two parts of Germany, and look up there, look at the yellow. Now you talk about something that irritated the Germans, and that of course was the free city that was to be supervised by the League of Nations. And this particular area was not supposed to be under German control or Polish control. Danzig, it was called back then. It's a Polish city now, but back then it was primarily a German city. And the Germans took great exception to this. And of course, this fed into people like Hitler and others associated with that movement. But for the purpose of German-Polish relations, I imagine they just didn't discuss those things. They just talked about, let's just get along. Can't we get along? And of course, the Poles were anxious to do that. You can hardly blame them. So this is 1934. Just so we are aware, when we talk about Poles, let's not think they're living in some sort of wonderful democracy and anything of the sort. That has often been the misapprehension, the big bad Germans versus the wonderful little Poles. And it wasn't like that at all. But just to understand, Poland was in a very, very difficult position. And between the Germans and the Soviets. And of course, sometimes when you get hurt, you want to hurt other people. And among those, they like to hurt those wonderful people that we all love, called Czechs. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So we understand that even the great Czechs, we have one here. And we understand, of course, that they have to put up a lot with Poles.
Recession.
Yes. And we're going to get into that. Now, here they are. I know. Laval, Pierre Laval. You say, boy, he's going to end up poorly, firing squad. But right now, he's riding high. He wore a white shirt with a white tie, which I don't think is attractive. And, he had that nasty habit. So he would have like ashes coming down, on him. So having those galois, yes, they used to do that. Nasty. So that's our Pierre Laval, who was the foreign minister of France, and talking with someone, I imagine, who spoke both English and French, as far as I know. I know he spoke English. Litvinov, Maxim Litvinov, and some of you will remember we talked about him as the great communicator with Westerners because he had a Western background. He was married to an English woman. But of course, if you were to say Joe Stalin, it's like, I love you. So don't ever doubt that he was, as we used to say when I was a boy, hardcore card-carrying communist. Okay. It wasn't like it was just on weekends or something. No, 24/7, baby. Okay. That he had, Marx and Lenin's greatest hits. Don't you worry about that. In any event, all of this means that Laval and Litvinov are probably not going to be friends, but neither one particularly like Germans. So you don't like Germans, we don't like Germans, we're both concerned. Could we be allies? Well, that's a little strong. Let's just call it, we're going to have a relationship. We're gonna get along. And so the news got out, you know how it is in diplomacy. They have all those cocktail parties. And you think, what do they do? Well, I think what they do is they talk about, have you heard? So-and-so's going to get in a relationship with so-and-so. They talk about all this stuff. Yeah. In Washington, D.C. on our money. Yeah. Yeah. Taxpayer money. And not only do they drink, but they have all those hors d'oeuvres. So, yeah, and all of that is devoted to this kind of diplomatic gossip. And part of it Have you heard about the French? They're going to make a deal with the Soviets. No, really? Are you serious? You know, that I really believe that. But these two, which made a lot of people very uncomfortable, decided to come to this agreement, a Franco-Soviet agreement. And you'll see why this date is important of 1935. Because again, you know, it's like, who has ever had an agreement with the Soviet Union? See, some of you will remember we talked last time about how the Soviets really didn't have any friends. I mean, you know, it's like you can go at most popular country in Europe. I mean, no, nobody wanted any commie countries. And during those early years, diplomatic relations were, even the United States didn't even start relations until 1933. And in the other cases, they just did it, but we don't like it. But we're not enjoying being associated. Remember, China wasn't communist back then, or any of these other countries that we think of in Eastern Europe. So Soviets were all by themselves, but you know how it goes. Times change. And the French decide maybe this is a relationship we need and we can have it. I find it sort of odd the French have a relationship with Poland and the Soviet Union. So they're trying to, you know, everybody, anybody who's around the Germans, we want to be your pal. And we hope you like us. But it didn't please anybody else. The British were decidedly anti-Soviet. And the idea that the British, who had been hanging out with the French quite a bit, remember all the way back in World War I? Oh, I'm not saying that their relationship was always love, friendship. You know, the French and the English. They've had their troubles. But in terms of the German situation, they were going to stick together. But when the French start getting involved with the Soviets, the British are going like, afraid we can't be with you, mais non, as they would say in Paris, right? So obviously, and the little Entente. And some of you will remember the little Entente were those Eastern European countries that were against Hungary, as in Romania, Czechoslovakia. And generally speaking, they were a little nervous too, because if you were part of these Eastern European countries and somebody says, guess who's going to be your great friend? The Soviet Union. You're going like, oh, wait, let's talk about this. Yeah, it's like, do we need that kind of help? Because you can see sometimes when they say they just want to love you, they love you too much. Okay, so it's a little possessiveness. So we'll leave out modern day concerns, but just be aware that this is not new by any means. In any event, so they do come up with this agreement in 1935, and believe you me, it did not create confidence on the part of France's allies that it has a deal with the Soviet Union, but, you know, I guess it's all in the eyes of the beholder who, when you look at and consider those kind of agreements. Well, just to beat the band, yes, the British say, well, we can play at making agreements. See how you like that, Pierre? Yeah. And that, of course, is this very famous naval agreement that I'm sure Frank would talk about at length. It is an agreement that the Germans had wanted, which was not part of their package after World War I. But Hitler, of course, simply said, the treaty be darned, you know, or a stronger word. But that is to say, this naval agreement was not something that was considered. You remember the German Navy was basically scuttled after the war. But now you could see von Ribbentrop, who went on to be a German foreign minister, and he had been ambassador to Great Britain, and he'll supervise these negotiations and giving the Germans 35% of the tonnage of the British Navy, which I suppose was maybe one of the largest in the world at this point. I'm sure it was. Was quite a move. And as you see, the German Air Force, conscription, all of these policies were now implemented in these years. And I suppose if they had done anything about it, the Germans might have backed down, but they were hardly going to do it under these circumstances. It's almost like you got the British deciding, well, if the French are going to go their own way with the deal with the Soviets, we'll have our own agreement with the Germans, and we'll have our own security. Yeah. And it's like, did this create bad blood in Paris? Yes, it did. And of course, you can imagine if you were the British ambassador in Paris, you know what they would do? They would call you in for addressing it. They do that a lot, I guess, between cocktail parties. That part of it, if your country is one of those that gets a lot of attention, and I'm not saying all do, but if you are one of the big ones, you can expect to be summoned to the office of Secretary of State in our case, but and to be dressed down in a way to express the unfortunate feelings of the host country. In any event, so this Anglo-German Naval Agreement, and you see, it's the spring of 1935, and I am doing it chronologically to see that we've had the Franco-Soviet agreement, and then we have this Anglo-German agreement, and you're thinking, would this be helpful to the Franco-British relationship? I doubt it. Would you think? I mean, it's like, what would they say? They're cheating on each other, but openly, I guess. But yes, it's like you can hardly consider this, you're my main one. You're my main squeeze, or whatever they say on the streets. But basically, that is the idea. And of course, they're all dressed to the nines, aren't they, for that, yes, in their diplomatic outfits. And I'm sure they had nice cocktail parties too. So, yes, indeed. Now, the Olympics. The history of the Olympics is very, very interesting, isn't it? I understand that the modern day Olympics began in the 1890s, and many of you have been aware, of course, of some of those. I believe there was the Beijing Olympics, and There have been various Olympics that have been, shall we say, somewhat controversial, but I don't know if there's been one that's been any more or as controversial as this particular one. I may be wrong. This was 1936, and of course, from what I've read, Hitler was not so much interested in the Olympics as he was the international recognition, as in Germany's back. So the Berlin Olympics would be an effort to get all of the other countries to send their athletes there. And as far as I'm aware, there was no one who was boycotting or anything of the sort. So you will see in the what's left, is there about 30 seconds here?
A minute and 20.
I'm making quick. And yeah, you will see a few people of color, and not just the famous Jesse Owens, but other people as well, who were participating. Now, again, I have always read that Hitler was not necessarily a major fan of the Olympics. He was interested in other sports. But insofar as it was going to bring recognition to Germany, of course, he was very interested.
The German team as hosts come last, and then Germany's Führer declares the 11th Olympiad officially open.
Ich verkünde die Spiele von Berlin zur Feier der 11. Olympiade neuer Zeitrechnung als eröffnet.
So, with the pigeons carrying a message of peace to the world, begins the event for which all Germany has been preparing for months past. For 14 days, Berlin will be the scene of the fiercest battles between 50 nations, battles of peace. For 14 days, the eyes of the world will be on Berlin, and Germany wants to send away every one of her millions of visitors as a friend. Meanwhile, the last torchbearer has reached the stadium after the final run out from Berlin to light the Olympic beacon with fire carried from the scene of the old Olympic Games in Greece. And veteran German athlete Rudolf Ismayer takes the Olympic oath on behalf of all the competitors.
Wir schwören, bei den Olympischen Spielen ehrenhafte Kämpfer zu sein und die Regeln der Spiele zu achten.
Is that it? Okay. The mixing of athletics and politics is sometimes today considered bad form. Some of us will remember the 1980 Olympics when the Americans boycotted, and gosh, I must have read an article, I guess it was in Sports Illustrated, about the disappointment and hurt of the athletes who felt like the issue should never have been involved. And you take it back to 1936, I guess you might have had the same reaction. You may have read about this and be aware of how they took down all of the signs about Jews while the tourists were there and all the rest of it. But that said, the athletics seem to have gone on, and of course, a person of color, in the case of Owens, outran the Germans, so they didn't try to hide that. So all I'm saying is, I assume that they just took their chances, but there were Japanese there, Chinese, in parts that I didn't show you, that there were all kinds of different people there. But yeah, the British are always there to comment on these kinds of events. So here we are in the middle of 1936. And look who's coming to call. Remember him? Last time we saw him, he was in Paris. And he was British Prime Minister. And that was 1919, and now it's 1936. Time flies. But yes, he was still very powerful. He, House of Commons, member of the House of Commons. He was no longer, of course, Prime Minister, but he liked to travel. And so I guess in the same year, and I think for reasons of his own, he said, well, you know, this Hitler fellow is not our kind of fellow, but maybe I should just, since I'm in the area, maybe I could just go by and see him. It's sort of like, yeah, near, not Berlin, but in the Berchtesgaden, Hitler's home. And so that's where you have it. You can see von Ribbentrop in the background, who I guess was the handler. And you don't want to overdo it. He's not coming for a long weekend. He's just sort of coming over and maybe having a short one and then Auf Wiedersehen, you know? So I don't mean to dismiss this, because believe you me, the media played it up big. And yes, when I tried to tell, 18-year-olds, yes, we had media. We did. I know you think it was the Dark Ages, but the media was very significant then. And that someone of the stature of Lloyd George is going to Hitler's was sort of like important. I don't say that Lloyd George was ever a fan, like I want to be a Nazi, maybe I can form a London chapter. No, it was nothing like that. It was just like, hi, bye, it's been real. You know the basic idea here, but I think it's very, very interesting indeed. Needless to say, but I will, he was not happy later on that he had done this. But I guess we all make decisions that we don't necessarily think of as being wise later on, but he was definitely no convert. He just basically said, well, the Germans can do as they please, but not our kind of situation, because we're not into authoritarianism. Yes. Yes, there they are. Yeah. You think of unhappy royals. You think just because we have two currently, yeah, we had them then too. And they were quite the pair, weren't they? Boy, and you talk about divorced Americans. Think of a parallel. I think it's hitting, and it's hitting pretty obvious. Mrs. Simpson. Now, when you see this particular photograph, you will understand she was not especially young. She had been married twice before, and they had, quote unquote, dated for some time. As a matter of fact, Gloria Vanderbilt's, I believe it was her twin sister, was actually the special friend, shall we say, of the king. And her name was Furness, Thelma Furness. And she was going on a trip home to the United States, and she asked Mrs. Simpson, could you look after David? Okay, so when you look after people, usually these are extras. I mean, that's not usually part of what we mean by taking care of. But in this case, she moved in, literally and figuratively. We don't need any more pictures or details. I think you get the picture. And so when Thelma Furness came back, he was totally captivated by Mrs. Simpson. So obviously, if they had, could you imagine if back then they had Facebook or all those? Oh my Lord. But they had those nasty newspapers. Those of you who ever went to London, they used to stand out there at subway stops and sell those rags. And these poor creatures, they posed on the front covers. I think one was called A Sun. And they were these cheesy pictures of people who weren't dressed. And yes, and they were not at all proper. Okay. And I don't think they'd been to either Cambridge or Oxford. They cut their education short. And these kinds of, they were full of this stuff. And let's face it, there are a lot of folks out there buying these kinds of newspapers for long rides on the subway. So all of this provided great fodder for the masses. And you say, but don't you want to hear the latest diplomatic news? And then, Anglo-French. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah, I don't mean to be disillusioning here, but I'm just saying people love the dirt. So all of this then is to say that we find out that a few months after their marriage, which was in France, by then, of course, the abdication had taken place. And then, from France, they went to Germany, and I guess, do I get it up here just as usual? Is that right? Yeah, I'm trying to show them.
Yeah, apparently it's not right.
It's not.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Got a problem.
Okay.
Got a problem, you sir.
Are you trying to start the video?
Yes.
Berlin. A huge crowd greeted the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, and they were specially welcomed by Dr. Lai, the Reich's organization manager. The purpose of the visit was to study social institutions and welfare. Later in the day, the Duke attended a workers' concert.
That was only to let you experience the fact that this visit, quote unquote, was not of any great matter of moment. He was merely the Duke of Windsor now, but he was interested in social issues when he had been king and before. So the idea that now they are going there and seeing what solutions the German government of that day, which was 1936-37, right around in there, after the marriage, would indicate that the Germans hope to get some publicity from this and make the British government feel presumably happier about it. Of course, we all know how the British felt about their former king, if I can call him that. That was a very strange relationship, wasn't it? those of you saw The Crown, I'm not altogether sure how accurate that is, because the writer of The Crown was definitely trying to show us him as really sorry. So I won't get into that, but I will just note that there are very mixed feelings about that. But the idea of the former king going there and hanging out with these major German leaders would have been somewhat controversial to his own countrymen, who really didn't get to see him very often anymore. Okay. What am I doing wrong, Sherry?
There we go.
There we go. The Rhineland, and Judy, I know you remember that because we talked about this. And some of you have been to Cologne, I suspect, and you know that particular area. The Rhineland was a very important area for Germans. And it was an area that had more or less been made non-military. It was called demilitarization. And the Germans, after Paris, after the treaty, in the Versailles Peace Treaty, were forced to agree that all that area would be demilitarized. And you can figure out why. Because it's the area next to France and even up to Belgium. So the idea is, if y'all get any ideas about coming in an ugly way, not a friendly way, then we're going to have some warning and we can get ready for your visit. So that is the idea of this demilitarization. The area, and if I can note this also, guess I can go over here, okay. This area called the Saar, S-A-A-R, had voted to return to Germany after 15 years. So it was clear that in terms of popular feeling, the people who lived there wanted to be part of Germany. In other words, those years after World War I, the Great War, those feelings only grew stronger. In part, I guess, there was probably a Nazi movement and cheerleaders who were more or less kind of stirring up the old patriotic feeling. But this area was very industrialized and very significant. Now, some of you, of course, you see the area that's that pale yellow, Alsace-Lorraine, and you will be aware that's an area that's gone back and forward, and it seems German in character, but at the same time, it had been French, I suppose, since Louis XIV was King of France. So a long time, Germans took it away, and then, of course, the French got it back. But all of this is to say this particular area, and you see the Belgians. Now, you will not be surprised that the French and the Belgians had a relationship. We all do with our neighbors. See the good or bad. In this case, it was pretty good. It was good to the extent that they both knew they didn't want any German troubles. I mean, the Belgians, they knew about German troubles. Think 1914, okay? Yeah, so basically they were very concerned about that. And of course, the French and the Belgians, we will work together. Then came March the 7th, 1936. Again, I'm not necessarily going totally in chronological order because, you know, we have King Edward VIII, that is Duke of Windsor. Those issues may come after, but this, as far as Germany is concerned, and indeed for those who are thinking about how does World War II come about, some would say this will be the critical event. When Hitler took the chance and said, we are going to basically ignore that demilitarization. Of course, he had an excuse. He said the whole Locarno Agreement is just over. We blame you because we blame you in the West because you French made a deal with yuck, the communists. So we don't like you. We resent you. You broke the agreement. So that's over. And of course, I'm sure the French tried to reason, but no way. So I believe it was very early in the morning. I guess the people in that part of the world, which you've been to, that were alerted, you know, the troops are coming. And boy, is that it, Sheriff? Can you start that or can I?
Troops cheered and lionized by the civilian population. Cologne Cathedral, so familiar to the British Army of Occupation, witnesses the march of soldiers again. Soldiers of Germany sent into the Rhineland as an accomplished fact by Hitler. It was the day before the anniversary of Heroes' Day, which Hitler chose for his. Germany's mourning for her war dead is expressed by a national ceremony on March the 8th in the Opera House, and consciousness of having regained full sovereignty exalted the hearts of the participants in this solemn occasion. On the previous day, Hitler had arrived at the Reichstag's temporary building and reviewed his guard of honor before entering. The words of his epoch-making speech were carried to the waiting crowds, and when he returned to the Chancellery, he had to acknowledge again and again the cheers of his delighted compatriots. The world, though shocked by Germany's repute exercised at Versailles, hopes that out of the difficult situation may be rebuilt a new peace system on a surer foundation. Meanwhile, Germany resumes her watch on the Rhine. The armistice evacuated the territory. Before in training, the commanding officer held a march past of the battalions stationed in Wiesbaden. Then final orders for the journey home were given.
16th instant. The owner's rank and name and regiment to be painted on packages. The battalion leaves for Catterick on the 23rd. As the heavy baggage will not arrive until the 10th of October, articles necessary for the journey will be kept back with the light baggage. ad valorem forms will be handed to Lieutenant Parker forthwith.
You give me the place where all the Irish was born. That's Goodhill Island underneath the north.
It's typical of the British Tommy that though he was naturally received with stolid silence as an unwelcome visitor in 1918, he left in 1929 as an old friend.
Did any of you go to what the British call cinemas? And have you ever done that? I mean, it's like a very different experience back then. I remember people would stand up, of course, so we could sing to the Queen. Yeah, and people would light up and have cigarettes right there in the cinema. So all of these little films, people were watching, and of course you could consider it a form of propaganda and working very well, I assume, for whatever cause, because I think you could get the sense from the British that they were not happy about the remilitarization of the Rhineland, showing, of course, all that they had put into it. And these nasty Nazis had broken their pledge. But the idea is that some historians, and particularly in the case of when you read the textbook or other books, maybe even in Cliff Notes, I don't know. But Cliff probably has one on World War II, that this was supposedly the last chance that the Germans could have been pushed back. And the theory is, and this is the way people make their livings, it's not just teaching required history classes, it's also coming up with the idea of what if. And one of the what ifs is, what if the French, backed up by the British, had said to Hitler, no, you can't go into the Rhineland and we will fight you. Would the German troops have been withdrawn? So people will, I know, but they did. They just said, this is very naughty. I mean, tisk, perhaps we will have a cup of tea. I know. And then discuss. And of course, we'll see other incidents. But it's interesting that this way back in March of 36, because really we are just getting started. But it is to say that as of this point, that maybe Benito Mussolini is looking at Hitler and saying, well, you seem to be doing a good job. I mean, I'm pretty impressed. And his son-in-law, that fellow there, Count Chano, got the idea. Hey, boss, Duce. Yes, the boss. Sorry. For those of you who like the New Jersey version, I'm sorry. But it's kind of interesting to think about this Rome-Berlin axis and why it came about. But I think it's probably the idea of China and Mussolini that, you know, we are Italy. We're big, we're bad, we're tough. But why don't we just have this relationship? And he says, well, what should we call it? The axis, because the world goes around us. You say, but I thought that was the Comintern, the Communist International. Bad talk, bad talk. That's red talk. No, we're all about fascism. And we and those Germans who imitated us, by the way, and their uniforms are not nearly as cool. Our uniforms are so much better. And I haven't seen Hitler jumping through Ring of Fire lately because I am in great shape. So the idea being that the axis, this Rome-Berlin axis, which eventually will include Japan, was brought about with possible exceptions. I mean, it wasn't as close as maybe they're going to get. But once you're down that path, you say, I think I love you, and then we move on to the next step in our relationship. But it's got to start somewhere. So it started, you notice, in the fall of 1936, and believe you me, everybody's watching. You were at that cocktail party. Before you have too many hors d'oeuvres, they're going to say, you heard about the axis. Oh, Lord, could you imagine? And those checks, they're probably there. They're upset.
You didn't like that?
No, and I mean, if you're in Geneva hanging out at the League of Nations, what do you, I mean, they have cocktail parties too. I mean, nobody's drinking diet soda. Believe you me, they are all adult beverage. And they are talking about this because, remember, the Italians, we really wanted them to be our friend. And it hurts, you know, being rejected. But it's interesting that Camp China wanted to make himself valuable. This will evolve or really run into what's called the anti-Comintern pact, which is very ironic because the Soviets will claim, you know, the Comintern is a separate entity, so we're not really involved with the Comintern. You say, but that's a lie. Yeah, you know it and I know it, but I don't guess you can really, I guess they can say it, but they don't acknowledge it. So when you say the anti-Comintern pact, you're just saying, we don't approve of the Comintern because they're trying to create revolts against our government, our society. And so we're opposed to that. But we can get along with the Soviet Union. If you follow that kind of, you know, yeah, it's kind of bizarre. So they establish it, and it becomes a very large club. You see the Germans signing up with the Japanese, and then the members keep coming in: Manchuria, Manchukuo, Hungary, Slovakia, your Czech former friends.
Never friends.
Well, yeah, part of the same country, but Franco, Spain, and you take it. It's like an oath, like a fraternity. I mean, it's like, I promise that I will always hate the Comintern. Say I do, you know, and that's what. So all of these people, and that's the idea. But at one point, they say, but that doesn't mean we can't get along with the Soviet Union. It is bizarre. In any event, many people ask me, how could the Germans acknowledge the Japanese as their allies when the Germans are into this kind of racial superiority. My sense is that we just don't discuss those things. Y'all in y'all's world, we're in ours, but let's work together for mutual conquest. Okay, buddy? Yeah, that kind of, it seems very bizarre though, doesn't it? The Germans actually had been associated with the Chinese. Some of you will remember Chiang Kai-shek and that the old days of the Chinese Republic, but that definitely changed during this time. Bloom, what a fascinating guy to me. And those of you interested in the Third Republic will be aware he epitomizes the first Jewish French leader. He was elected in 1936. He was a major figure in the French socialist movement. And if you were red, I mean, if you went all the way, you know, Moscow, you and the whole thing, he's okay with that. We can all work together. We're all to help the working folks. And in 1936, he became the leader. Again, that 1936, when you roll over tonight, I want you to remember 1936. That's our big year. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and say, bloom, bloom, Rhineland, Rhineland. There's so many things I've been. There'll be a review next week, so you better remember this. So basically, he will lead what's called the Popular Front. You want the 8-hour day, the unions, a lot of what we would consider to be the basics, the right to strike, minimum wages, all of that will be enacted. It's quite a major accomplishment in what is a relatively short period, 1936 to 1937. And it's done amazingly. And Israel, I do that there too, these coalition governments. And you're always worried somebody's feelings are going to get hurt or they get bent out of shape, I believe. That kind of talk, you know, that sort of thing. Somebody gets, you know, it's very, very hard because you have all of these different parties, socialists, radicals, communists, all of these different groups, and you can imagine all the would-be prima donnas in these parties. But Bloom was chosen. And you'll notice the expression better Hitler than Bloom. Because believe you me, we know about divided countries. And this was a divided country, that is France, in the 1930s. Because I'm going to tell you, you were conservative, Catholic, upper or middle class, this was the enemy. They did not like him. And you see, he did not last a long time. And he spent part of World War II in a concentration camp, happily surviving and going on to continue to be a leader until his death in 1950. Here he is. That is his wife, and the guy with his hand up. I don't know why that guy has that sort of look, because he's one of the, yeah, no, he doesn't look happy. He committed suicide a few months later. So, I mean, funny you mentioned that. Yeah, I mean, this is really sad, isn't it? but he was part of the Rudikov. Now, that guy ended up spending World War II in Moscow. Do you think he was a card carrier? Yes, comrade. He certainly was. Yes, red as a beet. Yes. And you say, well, and he's there with Lou. Yeah, the communists are funny friends. We'll just, we kind of like y'all, but no hugs. Just handshake. That'll be enough. Don't touch him. But basically, he wanted to be, his name was Therese, and he was hanging out with this movement. So they're very excited to, and the unions were very excited. I mean, if you were on the left side of things, this is your time. And what made this so difficult, of course, will be the foreign policies. For those of you who do not know French, basically it's just saying that the Popular Front is run by the Soviet Union. And all of it is to indicate that this particular movement would be able to, the church would probably preach against them. I don't think you had been going to Mass, they would have said, go Bloom. Yeah. Bloom's the man. Yeah. No. And so these are the Soviets who pulled the strings of the Popular Front. And of course, the 1st of May, May Day. And of course, we know, see that 40 hours collective contract, and you go, oh my gosh, yes. These are all the ideas of the labor movement, and they're just saying, go Bloom. Yeah. So this is very popular in some circles. Not all circles, mind you. But in the circles that counted at that particular time, as far as the left-wing movement was concerned, the problem was going to be in the interesting area of France's neighbor down south. Yes, the wonderful Kingdom of Spain, or should I say, Republic of Spain, because by then it was. And the Spanish were saying, that is, the people in the Spanish Republic were saying, we are socialists and you are socialists. It's just the Pyrenees. Come on across and we can hang out and be amigos. And Bloom's saying, yeah, no, I guess maybe not. We've got some other projects. We wish you all the best. We're hoping. But the idea is that this whole Spanish Civil War, again, 1936, big year to remember. You can list all those events. So, yeah. For your discussion part of the test, you can list all that. So you understand then this is going to be very, very important as we proceed forward in the Spanish Civil War. Meanwhile, and finally, Maginot Line. Maginot being an important French defense minister. It was named for him, and the line consisted of these amazing fortifications that would be built, as you see here on the map. The reason the ones that you see up towards Belgium are the so-called weak fortification as opposed to strong fortification is because of Belgium. You notice that Belgium, and you know what the Belgians are going to say? Well, after March the 7th, 1936, which you remember, God, your mind is amazing. Anyway, when the Belgians, probably from Brussels, going to send a note to Paris and say, you know, folks, you know how we were kind of tight? You know what? We're going neutral. We want to wish you all the best. Bon chance, as they say in Brussels. Yeah, the Belgians decided to go neutral based on the fact that they just don't feel secure. So that's why these fortifications are less tight. But Maginot thought he had found the idea we're going to build these major fortifications. These would have air conditioning, among other advantages, that would house people who could observe enemy attacks and could prevent them from going further, presumably. The idea, of course, being, and there was one of them, aren't they just monstrous? When you go over into that area of France today, many of them are still intact, believe it or not. Although I think the Germans may have seen them, look almost like people, don't they? But this is all brush, and you see the turrets, and you see the top part. Could you imagine being in there? Yeah, that is huge, though. They were very large, and the idea was that Maginot Line was supposed to protect them. Germans will never get through there. Just try. It doesn't mean we don't still need to be very concerned about the Germans. But these were built, starting with 1929, and they continued to work on them. So it must have been a major project in addition to their social spending. I guess they were also dedicating a large part of their budget to defense spending as well. But these were all along the eastern French border with the Germans. And the Belgian area would have been stronger, but of course, the Belgians decided to pull out and basically say, we like you, je t'aime and all, but not the way before. We'll go your way, you go your way, I'll go mine. That sort of thing. So Belgian neutrality, which seems very odd, all things considered. But the Maginot Line and these would be all through. Can you imagine if you love the scenery and all that? This is not really an attractive feature, is it? But I understand they're still there. I saw one pictured with the French flag, and I wonder, could you be a tourist and take a tour of one of these fortifications? Yeah. And so bring your money, because I'm sure it's not free.
No, it's not free.
No, that was what I was afraid of. So save up. So you save up.
It's not that expensive.
Okay, well, but is it economy or first class?
Well,
or
it's
is
pretty
it-
economy.
Okay. Because cocktails,
No cocktails.
no cocktails. So finally, by the end of 1936, 37, as we're going to be seeing, there are some serious problems. But I don't think people are just saying, okay, we're going to have a war. It's coming to a continent near you. And so I don't think that is. I think there were still individuals, appeasers, or others who believed that war was preventable. You know, it had just been 20 years. You know, I can remember 20 years ago. Can you? Yeah. I mean, it's like nothing. And it's like, we can't do this again, can we? It's like that. But when we take into consideration the end of World War I, plus, of course, the Great Depression, then it helps us understand what a mess the world was in. And did I mention the League of Nations is not exactly helpful, and the United States is certainly not involved in this particular situation. So I'll leave it at that and look forward to seeing you next week, where we go on with Ethiopia and Spain. Thank y'all. Thank y'all.
We'll have some Haile Selassie jokes.
Okay.
It's hard to come up with those.
You're gonna